Alright, so now we're ready to begin my Unit 4, and we're going to move into organizational psychology. So in this little video here, we're gonna kind of introduce what is motivation. But before we do that, let's kind of get our feet grounded onto the organizational psychology thing. So as we said, the industrial side was kind of generically human resources stuff, hiring and firing and things of this nature. The O side is the idea that the entire organization exists as a whole, and anything you do to change one part of a whole system will change the whole system. I mean, we'll come back to that much later in like topic 14 or something in more detail. But that's the basic idea, is that it's going to involve things that change the entire work environment. Okay? So, on to motivation. Okay? So, we are familiar with motivation, right? Motivation comes from the Latin motive, which means to move. We kind of get an understanding that this is an incredibly simplistic image down here in the corner, that your ability to do the job times your motivation equals your job performance. Now, obviously, it's an incredibly simplistic view, but it's a recognition here that if you want to understand job performance, you must put motivation into the picture, okay? So this is, in some ways, managers don't quite understand what motivation is, and obviously you can't measure it because there's another one of them hypothetical constructs. But clearly motivation is a major part of the picture when it comes to productivity. Okay? So some of the major ideas behind motivation involve this idea of drive reduction. And drive reduction is this idea that we have a need. Say, for example, we need a need for food and water. And a need creates a drive. A drive is hunger or thirst. And we are motivated to reduce that drive by exhibiting behaviors such as eating or drinking, which will reduce the drive. So a drive is like an internal tension, undesirable internal tension state, okay, that we're motivated to reduce. And this whole idea of drive reduction hinges upon the notion of homeostasis. And this is originally, obviously, an idea from biology. But the idea is that we have an internal balance that we would like to have, a homeostasis, when it comes to body temperature, 98.6 degrees. We want to be 98.6 degrees, and if our body temperature gets too high, we will perform behaviors to bring it back to 98.5, or was it 98.6? Whatever. And if we're too low, we'll be motivated to perform behaviors to bring us back up to. And so this idea is a little bit strange when it comes to talking about motivation in an I/O world. But we find that these set points can involve a lot of things, okay? And we're going to get to job attitudes coming up pretty soon. But, we can have a set point for, like, the desired level of stimulation. So it might be, you might find that certain jobs have too much activity going on for an employee. If you put an employee in a job with too much activity, they'll constantly try to reduce their workload to get to that point. If you put them in a job that doesn't have enough stimulation, they'll be, doing counterproductive behaviors trying to get to. And so there's this set point at 98.6 degrees for body temperature, but also for things like how much stimulation I would like, how much arousal would be the perfect amount for my environment, or something of this nature. But a more specific motivation that is often incredibly highly tied into I/O work is need for achievement. So it's a social motive, but again, it can be understood in terms of a set point. That is to say, I have a level of achievement I would like to create. If I'm here, I'm motivated to do more. If I'm here, I'm motivated to slow down. So it's really quite a powerful idea that it it explains a lot. But as you can probably imagine, this need for achievement is strongly related to those big five personality factors we keep coming across the ocean, right? So clearly these are highly connected. But what's really interesting, and now when we talk about motivation, this is really where the wheels hit the road. Because we can talk about extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. And, I mean, if you're teaching child psych, your job as a parent is to get your children from being extrinsically motivated to being intrinsically motivated. So when they start going to school, then, you know, whenever they bring home a smiley face on their paper, you give them a lollipop, okay? And so the child is like, I am working to get smiley faces on my papers because I want a lollipop, okay? And eventually you want to internalize their sense of motivation where the child wants to get a good grade simply because it's the right thing to do, not because you're getting some kind of external reward for it. And if you can imagine, in the workplace, there are many things that are extrinsically motivated, right? I mean, workers go to work because they get a paycheck. But can you imagine if you were able to, and we're going to come back to Abraham Maslow, but can you imagine if you were able to internalize the motivation of a worker such that they don't come to work to get a paycheck, they come to work because they're fulfilling their life's purpose. They're self-actualizing. They're doing the thing that... And so all of a sudden the paycheck becomes secondary. You will have a much, much, much better workforce if they are intrinsically motivated as opposed to extrinsically motivated. So what kinds of things, kind of generalities, how can a manager motivate their employees? Okay, obviously, as I said, trigger curiosity, set challenges, okay? Internalize the motivation, right? Attend to motives. Yeah, clearly people want different things. Some people are driven by power. Some are driven by recognition. Some are driven by... And so you need to know what people desire and set that for them, okay? And then setting objectives that are specific, that are challenging with a lot of reports about it, okay? So now, what we're going to go through in the rest of this little module is going to be three major categories of motivation theories that have been studied in IO. The need-motive theories, the cognitive choice theories, and the self-regulation theories.